Hi everyone, my name is Kent C. Dodds, and I am super happy to be joined by my friend Tejas Kumar. Really happy to chat with Tejas. I don't remember when we started interacting. I'm pretty sure it was online, and then the first time we met in person, I think it was at Utah JS. Is that
That's
right?
right. That is right. Yeah, it was you
Yeah,
touching.
yeah, good times. I think the you know what? I think the first time that we actually interacted online was probably with Glamorous when you wrote the code mod.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much. For those who don't know, I actually recently wrote a blog post about how when I deprecated Glamorous. So you could go check out my blog about. I think it was like how to um, pride or progress over pride in open source or something like that, where I talked about when I deprecated Glamorous, which was my most popular open source library at the time. And I deprecated it because something better was built, and I didn't see any reason in investing my time and in contributors' time into making ours basically a late version of theirs, right? So, yeah, so I deprecated it, and Tejas was awesome and made a code mod to automatically migrate everybody's stuff to the new thing, which really that honestly that made it. I don't know if I'd actually decided to deprecate it until I realized that that could be done. So thank you for doing that. Helped a ton. Like PayPal used it. It was awesome. So thank you. And then Tejas, you and I also recently had a fun little thing with Docker where you taught me how to use Docker. So thank you. People can check out my YouTube channel where we could have a recording for that. So yeah, that was awesome. I'm definitely using Docker more, or like it's hard to not use more than zero. So, so I used to not use Docker. Now I do. So thank you for that too. Anyway, tell us about yourself, Tejas. Anything that I didn't mention that you wanted to bring up about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I love code. I've been writing code since I was 8, and I've been doing it pretty much ever since. And a lot of it's so fun because what used to bring me joy as a kid is now my day job. So
That's awesome.
that's fun. Yeah. We can't when I wrote the code mod for Glamorous, it was really because like the company that I was working at the time, like we had like hundreds of components, all of them styled with Glamorous, and when we saw the ticket or the issue about it being deprecated, we were like, whoa,
Oh
what?
no.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, oh man, what do we do? And
Yeah,
so
like when I opened that ticket, I was like, they're pretty similar APIs. I think that we like most things could be find replaceable. And I also knew about code mods. I taught people how to make code mods, and I figured if it was really that painful, we could probably make a code mod. And then you
yeah,
did, and I was so happy.
yeah, that was born out of the necessity. Like as much as I'd like to tell everyone, like, it's just because I'm a nice guy, it was built out of necessity for us actually needing it.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you for spending that time. I'm sorry that I made you do that.
fine. I had
There's
fun, dude. I had fun, and I got so good at code mods and Babel, so I should be thanking you.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
any any excuse to build something is always a good excuse for me. Yeah. So and then yeah, I think we also met recently at ReactConf in Vegas.
Yes, good
Um,
times, man. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it was good, and of course with the Docker. So really happy times.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So tell us a little bit like where do you work and what do you do for your day job?
Yeah, I work at a company called G2I, stands for Grace to the Internet, and that's literally what we want to do. We just want to help people who want jobs with React and Node find them, and we want to help companies who want like qualified engineers to find them. We just want to match make, but in a good way. Like we vet both sides. We vet the developers, so that for sure they are who they say they are, and we also vet companies to make sure they'll like fairly treat people. So
Hmm,
it's like we're making sure everyone's going to be nice to each other, kind of thing. And
that's
so
nice.
yeah, I help them with the vetting. I help automate and make the vetting process as fast as possible using all kinds of amazing cutting edge technology that I get to play with. So really, it's kind of like I'm like a chef with an infinite pantry, and I'm thankful every day that they let me do that. So
Wow, that's very cool. So, and I especially appreciate the vetting of the company and making sure that it's a place where people are going to stay. How do you measure that? Like, how do you make sure that these companies are a place that people want to stay?
yeah, it's hard because it's not something you can put numbers to, right? Like, and that's the problem because for us as engineers, we're always like, let's give them a score, and there's like the Joel test and stuff, but we don't. we find that less human and a bit more binary. So a lot of this comes out of conversations. We have people who specialize in those conversations, and the ability to discern things. And so really we do have like an internal checklist that I'm not probably allowed to reveal, but we figure those things out based on conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very, I think that's a wonderful goal. So thank you for doing that. That's good. Making the world a better place. I appreciate that. Cool. So Tejas, you and I have been doing React for a while. When did you start? Like, how did you get into React?
Dude, I got into React like before I even moved, and like I live in Germany, but like I got into React when I lived in Qatar, and I was like, I don't know, like 18, 19 years old at the time, probably, if I remember correctly. And I heard about it because I was working at a branding agency at the time, doing digital stuff, and we were using jQuery, pretty much industry standard at the time. And one of the project managers came to me and said, "Hey, there's this new thing. It's brand new. It's called React. Do you think we should use it? Everybody's using it." And I went, it's probably just some hip new trend, whatever. It's not going to go anywhere, you know. And then I started looking into it, and I saw JSX, and it was advertised as being some type of XML superset. I remember this very clearly. XML was a big keyword in JSX, JavaScript and XML. And I was like, yeah, I don't like how this mixes things. And the thing that made me
Yeah.
the most averse was, why are you including HTML inside your JavaScript? That's weird, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I had the same reaction. Yep.
So I was super against it in the beginning, but over time, once I think when Airbnb started adopting it was like a turning point for me, because I was like, okay, if these guys are using it, then there's probably something to it. So I started exploring it more, and once they once it became clear how React handles state and makes state predictable, that for me was the sell.
Yeah. Oh, the state management story for React. That it's interesting that you say that was the big sell for you, because I think a lot of people are frustrated, like pulling their hair out about state management in React, because like there are a million solutions to it. Do you think that some of these solutions are creating problems for their own solution? Like, is there a reason that the React state management thing really spoke to you?
Yeah, the reason it spoke to me was because it was encapsulated, like state wasn't global. And that's why when Redux came out with, the notion of global state updated only by reducers, I didn't know how to respond to it, because global
Hmm.
state had bit me very painfully in the past. Um, yeah, so the fact that everything was a component and the component had its own state, and the state wasn't allowed to be explicitly mutated, that for me was just a massive. It spoke to me because previously I'd just been reassigning things all over the place, and I had to rely purely on scope. Um, and that the clean encapsulation was what spoke to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say scope, are you talking about like $ scope from AngularJS? Is that what you were using at the time?
No, I'm talking about just like syntactical, lexical JavaScript scope.
Mm,
Like when,
hmm.
when you have a block and your variables are defined in here. Because this is also around the time where const and let weren't a thing. So nothing was block scoped. Everything was lexically scoped. So I'd assign something, higher up in my app, and then use maybe a plus equals operator to increment it. And that would change the value in it just, everything was unpredictable.
Yes.
Yeah. And React made things a lot more predictable. So.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. This was one of the things that really drew me into React, and for me, had been using AngularJS, and like for all intents and purposes, everything really is global because it goes into a global namespace, and you have your services or your
Yeah.
factories or whatever,
Yeah.
and because they have change detection, their digest cycle and everything, like mutation is an API for updates, for state updates, and I. Um, I loved it because it demos really well. You're like, look, I just have this little bit of code and then that's all. And it's so easy to do it that way. Well, yeah, it's easy, but is it simple?
Yeah.
And that's what really won me over for React. So is there anything else about React that like really spoke to you, or like um, the fact is that when I saw React, I was like, well, Yeah, but does it handle HTTP? And does it handle like all these other things that I was getting from my framework of choice? It didn't
Yeah.
really do any
Yeah.
of that. And so like that was my knee-jerk reaction. Did you have anything like any similar feelings?
Yeah, I thought React was really minimal because I had also used Angular at the time, and Angular is this like full-fledged beast, right? You have literally everything you could imagine, including templating, I think. And so React, yeah, I think the state management was definitely a big sell for me, but the biggest sell, for sure, is the fact that Facebook particularly has nailed the level of abstraction on React. Like they don't give you too much and they don't give you too little. React was always meant to be, or at least it seems. I'm not on the team, so I can't say it was meant to be this, but it seems like it was made to be um, kind of like the logo represents an atom that combines together to form molecules and then organs and so on. Organs, not organs, that's cells. You get the idea. And a lot of people would complain like, hey, where's my router, right? This was a big complaint. Where's the router? Angular
Yeah.
has a router. What's going on? But I think by intentionally leaving off and focusing on the one problem, they've done an incredible job of staying at that sweet spot of abstraction.
Yeah, I agree with that. The drawback to that, of course, means that like those things do need to exist, and that leaves it up to the community. What do you think the trade-offs are like that React made to by saying we're just going to do this one thing, we'll
Yeah.
do it super well, and we'll just leave it to the rest of you all to figure out the rest?
Yeah, I think the trade-offs, the tra- it wasn't a criticism. I think was one of the negative trade-offs. Like a lot of people would be, hey, this isn't a complete thing, and I've seen a lot of that where people literally will use Angular. I've seen this more in the enterprise world. People tend to use Angular because they get everything out of the box. What they don't consider oftentimes is the bundle size.
Mm.
Especially like I've heard a lot of teams say, "Oh, we only use this internally anyway, so we don't care about the bundle size." But that doesn't make any sense because at some point it's going to max out, and your internal staff's going to be annoyed at the bundle size or at the load time. Um, so one trade-off is, people will see it as an incomplete solution. Outside of that, I don't really see a negative because what has happened is because they've focused on solving one problem and solving it well, they've spawned the community they have today. Like the reason you're as well known as you are is in large part because they've left things off. And same for me. Like I've spoken at conferences and I've made a lot of friends because literally because the React team has said we're not going to do a router or a data fetching layer
Mm.
or things like that. So I think there's lots of positives and really I don't see any negatives from leaving stuff off except criticism, but you're going to get criticized one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me the beauty of it is that um, they are just so laser focused on making their layer of abstraction so solid.
Yeah.
And it's not like they ignore the need of everything else, and so they provide all of the things that those other things would need. And they give a declarative API for those things, which can then turn around and give a declarative API to everyone else. And it allows for like it's interesting the hubris of like we're going to be everything for everyone,
Yeah.
where like we'll solve all of the problems, and that means that only the engineers who work on that specific problem, and even if you accept like contributions from the community, yeah, no, we accept,
Yeah.
we accept work from, no, you're still going through PRs, and it has to be filtered through the ideas of the core team, right? So it is, there is a level of hubris that is like, we're just going to be everything for everyone, whereas
Yeah.
React is like, we're going to fill this in, we'll give you a really solid idea, and then everybody can work through
Yeah.
things, have their own ideas. They don't need to go through some sort of filter to get it into core or whatever. They try their experiments, and then the cream rises to the top, and then like people can contribute to those different things,
Yeah.
allowing for multiple solutions for different types of trade-offs. And I realize that like not everybody who uses Vue has to use the Vuex, I don't know how to say that, the Redux for Vue thing that like is pretty much the de facto standard. Not everybody who uses Vue or uses Angular has to use their Angular router. They can build their own, but it's not something that they do because it's built into core. Whereas with React, it is all 100% like this is what React provides. And now everything else can be figured out by the community. And it just increases the surface area of intelligent people solving really interesting problems, just because there's so many more people working on those problems.
Yeah, but at the same time, it leads to fragmentation. Like we have like how many, 5, 6 routers right now, and
Yeah, for sure, that's true.
And every day on Twitter, I see people going, okay, what should I choose? Should I choose Reach? And like, so part of my job at G2I with vetting is we vet React projects. We vet hundreds of React projects, thousands even.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah,
you could almost provide like a consulting arm where you're like, well, we're going to vet this thing, but then we'll charge you if you want feedback on it or something.
We could, and we might, but like the amount of React code we go through in a week is unimaginable. And so much so we're thinking about ways we can be faster because it's incredible. And what I see often is people's choice in solution, people's choice in routers, people's choice in styling. Like React doesn't even give you style primitives, right? And it's really fascinating. And oftentimes when we interview people face to face, that's what we'll talk about is, hey, why did you choose? Yesterday, I saw someone used hook state to manage their state in React. I didn't even know this was a library that existed.
I haven't heard of it.
It's like a I learned this by reviewing this person's code. It's a super powered version of the use state hook that gives you Redux style state management, but it's just use state on steroids. Yeah, but so what I'm ultimately the point I'm trying to make is it's good in that it spawns a community, but it can get confusing if you can't navigate it correctly.
That's true. And like I've seen talks, I had a conversation the other day with Ben Elegbadu about, as one of these conversations, really, really fun one. People who are watching this may have seen that already. And if you haven't, you can look forward to it. But he gave a talk years ago about like navigating the ecosystem of React. And there's definitely that, like you don't have that problem. It is a problem. You don't have that problem in other ecosystems. And so I would say that's absolutely a trade-off. But the benefit, or one thing that I've observed is that so much innovation is happening within React because you have so many people involved in working on the problem. And it's fun to, as somebody who participates in that innovation, that's a fun and exciting thing. And then as somebody who builds applications in that environment, you do kind of get tired of making decisions, which is why stuff like Epic React ends up working out quite nicely because I can give you an opinionated view on tools to use. And the cool thing is that even though there are trade-offs with these different tools, most of them you're not going to choose wrong. Like they're like pretty reasonable tools, even if it's maybe not necessarily the best tool for the job.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. In all of this, like it's becoming very clear to me that with React, it's because we spoke about the level of abstraction specifically, but if you think about it, React as a product makes the right decision of where the line is, like where the line to say no is on every level. Like they say, no, we're not going to do more than render. They say each component has a definite boundary, right? And if if you're opening pull requests, adding more than is needed, that's also a no. I find the reason React is so good is because of very clear boundaries. And I think these boundaries are best exemplified with the component model, right? Like where everything is a self-contained function that gets called and then composed, including hooks. Like the composability only works because of the boundaries. And I think, yeah, if I was to condense like everything I think is good about React in one word, it would be the boundaries. They've just nailed the boundaries.
And those boundaries expose declarative APIs that make
Correct.
it hard to use them wrong, right? Like it increases the pit of success.
Exactly. The boundaries with very clear ins and outs where you can't You can't make it blow up unless you really want to.
Sure. Well, people might take issue with make it blow up with regard to effects, like the infinitely looping effects and things like that. So that's one thing that I think is a pretty reasonable criticism of React, is especially the use effect hook. Um, People seem to struggle with that a little bit. And why do you think that is? And like, what do you think people can do to avoid the struggle?
That's a good question. I mean, I think to avoid the struggle, honestly, I just think like educate. I think the docs actually do a really good job of it. I think educating yourself on effects, what they are, and how they affect, a functional paradigm is absolutely key. Because a lot of people will come into React just going, okay, I have render and I'm just gonna return some JSX without really understanding the fundamentals, without understanding what function composition is and why immutability is so important in these contexts, and why side effects need to be explicit in these contexts. So I think reading the docs, and I've read the docs on each iteration, and they keep getting better and better. So I think that would be my first piece of advice as someone who's struggling with use effect, is look at the docs, because it's likely that they haven't, because the docs make it very clear. In my day-to-day work of vetting React projects, I've seen about, I want to say, 5% or so of projects, and this is being liberal. 5% of projects will just not have that second argument to use effect. So much so I've built my own tool to just automatically tell me when it's missing. And what I do see more often than that, though, is people reassigning state to something. This for me is the biggest beginner mistake with React. But yeah, for sure, I see where people struggle with use effect, because the expectation is if there's no second argument, then it just doesn't run more than once.
Yeah, you mean like if they provide an empty array for that second argument, like no dependencies?
I think if it's a beginner coming into use effect, I don't think they're going to even know about that second argument, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? Like, unless they read docs. And I think that's
well, I really like that as the default, because typically what that means is the effect is going to run on every render, and as long as your side effects are really just synchronizing the state of the world with the state of your app, then it is just a performance optimization to add to the array. Now, there are some situations where, like, if your side effect is maybe posting some data or something, then that could potentially cause some problems. But I'm actually glad that the default went from let's just put all of our side effect stuff in component did mount into something more akin to let's put it both in component did mount and component did update. Because like so often what I saw with class components is people would just they put it in component did mount, but then they'd forget, oh, the props can change, so I actually need to handle when the props change too. And so use effect just kind of removes that and says, actually don't think about life cycles, just think about synchronization of the state of the world to the state of your app, and that makes a big difference. And a problem that I see now with the use effect is people not putting their dependencies in that dependency array. And then sometimes having memoization problems when you're putting in like an object that's generated during render in there.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is people don't seem to get what that second argument is oftentimes. But I think still use effect, like we just now spoke about boundaries in React, and man, if you compare like component did mount or did update to use effect, like the whole semantic changes. It's because in component did mount and or component did update, you would have, window event listeners, you would have data fetching, you would have like Bob's your uncle of effects. You would have all the effects in that one method. And with use effect, you could have like 4, 5, 6 use effect calls explicitly saying this is one effect, that's another effect. And you could like granularly describe, only do this effect when that thing changes. It's leaps and bounds from class component life cycles.
Right. Yeah. And then the composition possibilities there. Like we used to have to do higher order components and render props and all this weird stuff to share stuff. And now it's just like, how do you share code? You make a function, and that's all. Like, it became so much simpler.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's because I think with hooks as well, they've just nailed the boundaries. So much so you can make a hook and unit test it even. Like you couldn't, if you had a class component with some methods, that would be a bit harder to test, I think, than just a function. So
Yeah, I still, on the testing side of things, I still strongly advise against testing custom hooks unless they happen to be like a library, or like highly reusable hooks. I typically recommend you just test the component that uses it. But you're right. Like you can package up these set of hooks into a single custom hook, and like it becomes infinitely easier to
yeah,
share that everywhere. It's just a matter of calling a function. Really, hooks changed the game, and it took what we had already as a really great abstraction and set of boundaries and simplified it further.
yeah,
You know, and simple is not easy either. Like that's an important distinction.
yeah,
It takes familiarity, and this is where I think what you're talking about with people struggling with use effect, it's a familiarity problem. Like they just need to familiarize themselves with the API,
yeah,
and then it becomes much more natural. But whether or not it's familiar to you, it is simple,
yeah.
and that makes it simplicity is what makes your application maintainable in the long term.
Yeah, definitely. And predictable in the short term and long term.
Yep. Yeah,
Like for
and bug
me,
free. Mm-hmm.
yeah, for me, it's all about predictability. And I think, I would really like some insight into how the React team makes decisions on like what to pursue and what to not. Because I've been a part of so many teams that will try to do everything. And why not, right? Like it's our inner like ego that makes us want to, I'm going to create the ultimate library that solves everything. But the ability as an engineering team and as an engineer yourself to say, no, that's not our problem to solve. That's not our level of abstraction is incredibly powerful. So yeah, that's something I might pursue after, and maybe you could make a course about.
Yeah, the power of saying no, or the skill of saying no.
At the right time. Yeah.
Yeah, at the right time. Yeah. Well, this has been a fun conversation, Tejas. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or mention before we wrap up?
Um, no, I'm quite happy to wrap up here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us your some of your time and your wisdom and perspective.
Actually, I did remember one thing I wanted to say as a
Sure.
wrap up. I think in the world of so many options for libraries and what do I use emotion? Do I use styled components, whatever? I think one thing in the React ecosystem that really stands out and makes all of this simpler and really gets time from zero to production down to seconds is Next.js. Man, I want to publicly applaud Next.js and its team because it is incredible software. It makes all your decisions for you. It is a full-fledged React framework, meaning it gives you primitives for routing, for code splitting, for server-side rent. It gives you literally everything. And all you need to do is make components in a pages folder, and you've got pages in your website. So for people wanting to kind of shortcut the decisions of router and styling and all this, I mean, Next still requires some CSS, but it works out of the box with CSS. Next.js, man, that for me, that is like the pearl in the oyster that is React.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a fan of Next.js. I had Guillermo Rauch in one of these conversations as well. So yeah, Next is some pretty powerful software. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's great. Cool. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us. Tejas, is there, if people want to keep up with the stuff that you're working on, what's the best way for them to do that?
Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Tejas Kumar _ because Tejas Kumar was taken. And if there's some way I can get it, I would. Anyway, that's Tejas Kumar _ Yeah.
Cool. Very good. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody in the future. Goodbye.
Bye.